Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden. This guy over here is Tim, and this is Second Legacy, and thank you so much for stopping by. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to do a live show. This is one of my favorite things that we get to do on this program because we get to reach out and talk directly to you guys. So if you want to be on the show, there's a Google link form right down there in the description. Make sure you fill it out, and we'll see if we can get you on here as well. Now, make sure as we go through this, you like, subscribe to the channel, and also turn that notification bell on. We are looking to expand freedom across this great nation, and you can be a part of that, and we ask you to do that, and thank you so much for your consideration. But with that out of the way, we're going to say a quick word from our sponsor, LAS Concealment, and then we're going to get to our caller. And the content today is brought to you by LAS Concealment. And if you're in the market for a holster for your favorite freedom tool, LAS Concealment is worth a look. They have everything that you could imagine, all molded from Kydex to your said freedom tool. Everything is fit directly to that model for a superior comfort and safety. They have inside and outside the waistband options, multiple designs, all sorts of different colors, and they are tested by the world's most elite special forces. Make sure you check it out. There's a link in the description box below, and thank you so much to LAS Concealment for making this content possible. All right, so now that we are back in here, we have Dean on the line. Dean, how are you doing? What you got for us? Thank you for calling in, man.
Well, enjoy both of your separate and your combined YouTube shows.
Thank you.
Reason I called, I'd like to make a couple of related points regarding that weapons of war argument that anti-gun politicians make against AR and AK frame guns. And I can't confidently say whether these arguments are hypocritical lies or they're just emotional appeals made out of ignorance of the history of the development of guns. I think we can start by acknowledging it's obvious civilian AR-15 rifles have both similarities and differences to the military M16 and M4 rifles. But it doesn't really matter, and here's why. The first irony is that great-granddad's lever-action 30-30 deer rifle is a pretty direct descendant from the Spencer carbines and the Henry rifles that were issued to some Union units in the Civil War. And the now common bolt-action hunting rifles, they're also very clear descendants from the Mausers and the other turnbolt rifles that almost every modern army adopted from between the 1880s to the very early 1900s. And these are the guns that the anti-gunners, at least temporarily, claim they're the good, or at least the less bad guns, instead of those more modern evil black rifles.
Well,
yeah. Well, I mean, you know. So, Tim, this is a caller after your own heart. I mean, like legit. This. I thought I'm talking to Tim right now.
Yep, I've put out several video shorts recently on the Military Arms channel talking about this, mocking this, because you're absolutely right, Dean. The firearms that they focus on, I think it's a mixture. It's a mixture of ignorance and purposeful lies, right? They understand that many of the voters that they're appealing to don't understand the history of firearms. When they say weapon of war and they hold up a picture of an AR-15 or an AK, well, they're conditioning and programming their viewing audience and also their voting base. And they're not telling them the truth. The truth is basically what you just said. A weapon of war has been pretty much anything a man could pick up and use in anger against another person. That is everything from clubs and knives to bolt action rifles, lever action rifles, single shot rifles, muzzle loaders, swords, you name it. A weapon of war is any weapon in the history of mankind. So it's misleading, purposely so. And so they are going after the guns, and this is historic. This has been my entire life. They're targeting what we used to call black rifles. Well, now they come in all sorts of colors, browns and greens and flat dark earth and all that good stuff. So we don't really use that term much anymore. Now it's, assault weapon, weapon of war, and all these other goofy things that they come up to describe them. But you're absolutely correct. They do have fundamental differences. But beyond that, I don't even want to get bogged down into the arguments of, the M16 is fully automatic and the AR-15 semi-automatic. Right. To me, that's irrelevant because that's allowing them to steer the conversation. The reality is we should be able to have the M16s, right? And that is the whole purpose of the Second Amendment. And they're trying to scare everybody into being afraid of these guns that just look scary. And functionally, I recently did a video where I'm talking about an old Remington 30-06 self-loading rifle, 7.42, and it feeds from a magazine. You can put a 10-round magazine in it, and it fires as fast as you can pull the trigger. I called it Grandpa's, it's a deer rifle, but it's Grandpa's assault weapon in the video. And I was just mocking this very topic because really functionally, there's no difference between that wood-stocked rifle and an M1 Garand. Actually, it holds more ammunition than an M1 Garand. And the M1 Garand is what carried us through World War II in Korea. And yet this isn't what they're focusing on because they want to focus on what they think is low-hanging fruit. And I just want to throw out their FBI statistics very quickly. Rifles of all types are used less than 500 times or misused less than 500 times in a nation of 330 million people. It's a statistical zero. And a subset of that would be AR-15s and AKs. So we're looking at maybe 100 misuses a year of a rifle that they have the entire voting public convinced that hiding behind every tree is just waiting to assassinate them because guns are the bad thing, not the bad people. It's the guns committing the violence in their view. So I'm sorry, I went on a long rip there, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
I personally, Dean, I like how you incorporate a little bit of history there because a lot of the pieces that are kind of forgotten over time is like you said, like Democrats, especially in swing purplish states, they all go with, well, I grew up in a hunting family and responsible gun ownership and our hunting tradition is so amazing in this country. But those assault weapons, weapons of war. So they try to draw a delineation between the two. And the entire thing is an exercise in marketing, to be quite honest with you, because to your point, the entire German army, for the most part, was using Mausers. Those are bolt-action rifles. The Russians were using bolt-action rifles, Mosin Nagants. Everyone else was pretty much using bolt-action rifles. America was using M1 Garands, as Tim just alluded to. The entire point is it's a game of manipulation. The reason that you consistently hear all the different terms that are rolling out at different times is because they are basically concept testing them against focus groups in order to see what's more effective to manipulate people's reactions for their points. I mean, I don't know if you saw it, but RFK Jr. literally just came out and said, yeah, anytime you're talking about taking guns from the Democratic side of the ticket, it's a lie. It's not going to work. It's failed. And I mean, that's important. Go ahead.
Excuse me. If time permits, I'd like to make a second point that I really enjoy because of the irony of it.
Okay.
This comes from the 1939 Supreme Court decision. I think it was Miller versus the United States. Most of us have heard about it, but we don't know the details. And as I understand it, Miller and his partner were kind of small-time crooks. They got caught running an illegal moonshine still, and they were in possession of an unregistered sawed-off shotgun.
Correct.
At trial, the judge dismissed the case on the pre-trial pleadings. He said that at least that provision of the NFA violated their constitutional rights, so he dismissed the case really pre-trial. So since the dismissal was pre-trial, no evidence was ever taken in the trial, and that'll be important later. The government appealed the dismissal, and the Supreme Court ruled, which is technically correct, that no evidence had been introduced that a short-barreled shotgun was potentially useful as a militia weapon. And in fact, shotguns with buckshot had been used in World War I trench warfare. That could have been established at trial, but the trial never got that far. So I'll turn the page for my notes here. The Supreme Court remanded the case back to the court for a new trial.
Correct.
We've heard a whole lot of those cases lately where the Supreme Court will make a ruling and then remand something back for a new trial. But by that time, one of the defendants had died and the other one couldn't be located. So that trial, the retrial, never took place. The great irony is that if you take the implications of that decision to their logical conclusion, military-style weapons are the ones that are most protected by the Second Amendment.
Well, right.
Anti-gunners are arguing that those military-style weapons are outside the protection of the Second Amendment. So I just like hear both of your response to that point.
Well, yeah, we can absolutely dive into that. We got about 5 minutes, just so you know. The big thing about that, when you're diving into the military style versus the non-military style versus the acceptable, not acceptable, you're splitting hairs, right? I think that
cosmetic. If you look at a picture of an AR-15 and you look at a picture of an M16, unless it's detailed enough that you can see the controls for the trigger mechanism, they look the same.
True.
Shoot the same ammunition, and they look the same. So somebody who doesn't care to get into the details says, same-o, bad, evil black rifle.
Well, right. But that's kind of the entire point, Dean, is it's all about marketing to the lowest common denominator. And I think Tim and I have talked about this a lot. When you're having conversations with people on the everyday level, not the in-depth like Second Amendment advocates, nothing like that. When you're talking about even gun control supporters, the zealots and the acolytes from Moms Demand Action and Every Time for Gun Safety, they don't know any of the stuff that you just hit with the Miller decision. They don't know anything about the NFA. They don't know anything about the Gun Control Act of 1968. They don't know about any of the Heller decision or the Bruen decision. All they know is gun bad, scary, good. So I think, Tim, in kind of wrapping this conversation, throwing it over to you, that's really what this is about. This is not actually a battle of splitting hairs of what is military, what is citizen. We're talking about a battle over perception more than anything else. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it is a battle of perception, but it's also interesting to note that I think one of the reasons why Miller isn't cited more often is because of the history that you just shared with us, Dean. But it does buttress the argument that the Second Amendment was intended to protect our right to maintain our own militia, us being the people, right? We are supposed to be armed equally to the government. So the Second Amendment protects our right to own what they're deeming to be military-style weapons. And so it's never been about hunting. It's never been about any of the other sports shooting or anything else that they want to try to divert the conversation into. The Second Amendment exists to give the ultimate power of government to the people. This is why you see Joe Biden and Swalwell and all the other morons out there getting in front of a camera saying, well, you're going to need an F-16 to go up against the U.S. government, because they know the purpose of the Second Amendment. And they're trying to dismiss it, saying it's silly in today's age.
Exactly.
I would argue that we just got out of a 20-year war fighting an enemy that didn't have any air power, that had basically no command and control whatsoever, certainly didn't have combined arms, and they fought extremely well given the limited resources they had, and they kept the American military busy for 20 years. So I would say you don't need an F-16 to go up against a modern military. I mean, that's been proven false over and over and over again.
Well, yeah, so, you could go back to Vietnam, all that.
Yeah, you could go back to any modern war of the 20th century.
To that point, a handful of guys with AR-15s are not very effective against an M1 Abrams tank or an F-15 Strike Eagle, but a handful of guys with AR-15s can make the country ungovernable. And
that's what scares them. That's what scares them.
That it never comes to that, but if it does, that's fact.
Well, right, and kind of to wrap it, because we got to get to the next call. But the big thing there is it's a guaranteed, mutually assured destruction. It's a mentality check. It's not necessarily you're going to go stand in front of a tank. It's do we really want to kick this hornet's nest? And and to me, that's one of the more valuable pieces. But I mean, Tim, you want to take us out, and then we'll get.
Yep. Absolutely. Dean, thank you for calling in, man. It was a great conversation. If you guys would like to be part of the call-in show, there is a link in the video description below. Follow that link, fill out the questionnaire. We'll contact you. We'll get you on the show. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you guys soon.